Okay, so first of all, we did a survey from you guys asking you what you needed, and one of the top things that came out was time management. And we wanted to make our team meetings more fun, and we're bringing in experts from time to time. And this month, we brought in somebody that Whitney and I have been working with for probably over a year. And it has to do with basically looking at your business, looking at yourself, looking at your systems, and taking it to the next level. The theme is eliminating overwhelm and distractions. And I'd like to introduce Krista Green, who is one of our coaches that we hire, and she comes in especially when we're busy. I mean, that's when we need it the most, is when we come back from a whirlwind trip, like we just went from Hawaii to Denver and then back to San Diego. And what she does that I think is very unique is she doesn't just look at time management as like the traditional way. Like some of you, who's taken a time management course before? You know, they're going to teach you, little tips and techniques and things like that. But she looks at it from a holistic perspective. Is how does it affect your soul? How does it affect your energy? How does it affect your attitude? And she's going to cover some things that we've been working on for Whitney and I. And so we're going to be students just like you. We've practiced everything that we're going to talk about tonight that we've already practiced in our own business and found value in it. So we put some time together to put together a little agenda of some important topics, and based on what we think you guys need and what you've told us you need. And so I'd like to turn it over to Krista. And there's going to be some time for you guys to interact and ask questions as well. And there's also some handouts. So if you have something to take notes with, great. If you need something, raise your hand. We have some handouts, so we can have you just scratch on the back of that if nothing else. Should I do the handouts now?
Yeah, sure.
So with that, why don't you guys help me welcome Krista Green?
Well, it's actually my first public appearance as Krista Clive Smith because I just got hitched last weekend. Yes, the website hasn't changed or anything yet, but you are officially the first crowd that I get to call myself Krista Clive Smith in front of. That being said, a couple of housekeeping rules just from my perspective. I am the single biggest klutz you ever have met in your lifetime, and so inevitably as I'm walking, and they're probably going to capture it all on video, you may, I'm going to try not to trip and go down or anything, but rest assured something may happen. Now, that said, please, the entire purpose of tonight is to give you bottom line, tangible value that you can take back to your life. So wherever, at any point during the content, you have a question, you have something that needs clarification, please don't hesitate to jump up, raise your hand, shout out, heckle, do whatever works best to ensure that you really get that actual takeaway that you can apply into your business and your life, starting later tonight and or tomorrow morning. So that said, overwhelm and distractions. Raise your hand if you have never experienced either one. Right? Hey! We have a live one in the back.
Completely different.
See, that's actually a ploy so that I can see who the smartasses will be in any given crowd early on. So thank you for showing yourself so early. All right, so that said, let's have some fun and do a little learning along the way. When we're thinking about overwhelm and distraction, one of the biggest things from an overwhelm standpoint is just looking at the sheer magnitude of anything you're up against. Many of you in the room have had some significant weight loss, right? That's what brought you and made you such passionate followers and wanting to become a part of this amazing family of Take Shape for Life. And seeing before and after photos and just hearing even just some of your stories, it's incredible. But think back to the day when you started your weight loss journey for the first time. The very, 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 very first time. Right? Before the stumbles, the falls, and then the final success that you've achieved through Take Shape for Life. Think of what a mountain that was in front of you. That's classic when we're talking about overwhelm. And I really get that in my own business life. I owned a professional organizing company that I franchised in Canada. And when you're training your team to actually walk into someone's space that is so overwhelmed with stuff that literally you cannot walk in. You have to purge your way into the space. there's a whole lot of things you need to do, one of which we actually used to teach our teams facial control, so that when they walked in, dead serious,
oh my God.
dead serious, and because when you walk in, you have to give the impression this is absolutely under no circumstances the worst space I've ever seen, even if you're thinking to yourself, holy smokes, how on earth will I get through this? And just knowing beyond facial control that the key to success is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? And that is not rocket science. A lot of what I'm hoping we'll be talking about in the next little while on the subject of organizing will be entirely fresh content you've never heard before, because most people I speak in front of say, I've never heard this perspective on organizing as it relates to energy. So again, thinking about that one step at a time. What is the hot button in your life? Where are the rocks in your shoes? Just call them out. What are some things that are current sources of overwhelm and or distraction, so that I can weave that into content as we go? Paper.
Garage.
Stuff.
Email.
Email. Did I hear a garage in there?
Mail.
Yes. Texts.
Return 50 phone calls.
Returning phone calls.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, I'm getting the genre of where we're going here. So, I feel like Vanna White. This is very exciting. All right. So, one of the key components that is the beginning of success is having that mindset shift. Not unlike, again, weight loss, a mindset shift must occur for success to really take place. So when people say as a New Year's resolution or on their to-do list, I need to get organized, that is setting yourself up, unfortunately, for failure, because that get and the ED at the end of it implies that it's a one-time event. And organization is not an event, it's a process. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a life cycle that means that once you get to the end, it comes right back to the beginning, to the middle, and to the end. And so once you can wrap your head around that and understand it's not about getting organized, but it's actually a state of being, that makes it a whole lot easier to manage. It's almost like the term perfection, right? Versus the term excellence. Because we as humans are innately flawed, so perfection is not even on the possibilities list, and we haven't even left the driveway yet. So knowing that, let's talk about the state of being organized and what exactly that really means. So as we think about the buzzwords in the industry of organization, clutter is one that always comes up. And the heart of what clutter really and truly is comes from the definition of the term. So the word clutter is derived from the Middle English term clotter. So if you think of cutting yourself, your blood would just continue to flow and flow and flow up until the point that a clot forms. Now that clot is a stagnation of energy that prevents flow. So clutter in your body becomes clutter in your space, a stagnation of energy that prevents flow. So now that's the first piece. You can see how all of a sudden this transforms your definition of the stuff in the garage, the paper, the phone calls, all of it, because it isn't so much about the stuff itself. It's where is it in the life cycle of that stuff and what's happening to it energetically. So when you think of how can I reduce clutter, well, one of the key components is this idea of flow. Getting in flow and staying in flow. And so one of the sort of phrase that pays that I'll get you to kind of hone into and brand into your minds for tonight is the phrase, keep it in motion. So think for just a moment, let's give it a bit of a residential setting so that you can grasp it, and then we'll bring it into the context of business. When you walk in, let's imagine that we are in a two-story place, or quite frankly even here. You walk in, many times people will take off their jacket and they might hang it on the chair that's here. And they'll say, I'll put it here
For now.
And put it away later.
for now. For now is the death of all organizational systems, really.
I'm really good at that one. That's my favorite one is
For
put it here
now. Yes. And what happens to that jacket that was, at the moment that you hung it on the back of the chair, it was hot. It was
Completely.
actively cycling in motion. Once you sit it there and walk away from it, the energy inside it begins to cool down. And eventually, someone else puts their jacket on, or it just becomes a magnet of stagnant energy, and that's where you start to see like attracts like. So that one magazine becomes a pile of 10. What's that? Making art?
Does that make it art?
Sometimes it does. However, when it's in your prime real estate, that's when it really starts to become an issue. Absolutely. If it were on the periphery, that's where that stagnant energy belongs.
Right.
But right smack dab in the middle of your prime real estate, now you're contaminating and affecting the entire energy in the space, which affects your performance as a human being. So when you think of this notion of clutter, because we've got a room filled with people that really understand the body and the way that it works and the power of it, let's bring it into your business in your language and think about the cycles of use of things. With the body, you ingest, you digest, and you excrete. In our spaces and our lives, we also need to follow that same pattern, right? Bringing in, utilizing, bless you, and letting go. And I see a lot of constipated houses. No, I really do. And inboxes and desks and other things where that inflow happens. The utilization happens to some degree, but usually performance is impacted, and the letting go component on the back end is usually where things start to block up and get backed up. So as we start to think about this, go back to the hot zone in your life, the one that is the trouble spot at your home or your office. And just think about that for a moment and really examine how much of what's happening inside that space is dead and cold energy that's sitting there right in the middle of it, which actually could be put somewhere else. So where do you put it? Well, now this is the positioning model. And this really should be your one-stop shop for how to organize absolutely any room, any given thing. Anyone know what a Bagua map is for feng shui? Mm-hmm. One person. So it's a 9-square grid that will tell you which is your wealth corner and your relationships corner and all the rest of that. It is on paper, when you draw out the 9-square grid, designed to hold it over the floor plan of any given room to be able to orient you and show you which corner is which. So you can almost think of this positioning map as a Bagua map for organizing. So that if you take this bullseye and hold it over the given floor plan of any room, that will tell you exactly where and how to position things for best maximum flow. So items in the heart of the room, the heart of the space, only your hot items. You've probably heard organizing wisdom that says keep only things you use or that you love in your prime real estate. Which part of why that is the case, when you think of usage, something that is in use is vibrating at a very high level, right? Because it's in motion. Things that you love, it could even be a photo frame for that matter. And when you look at it, you smile and you have this almost energetic exchange, which again makes the energy warm up. So that idea of keeping only what you use and love in the heart of the space is great because that's where things are already in motion. You'll notice that there's a blank ring around the hot space. That's where you want to have green space. Because think of creation, the art and act of creation. If we're talking a performance art of dance, or I figure skated for 19 years, anything that is like that performance art, it takes room, right? If you're crammed in, you can't create at the same level as you can when you've got a lot of room in front of you. So thinking about your offices, when you're using this model, another thing to keep in mind that's kind of a basic rule for positioning is with your desk. Do everything you can possible to not have your desk, if it's a corner desk, put into the corner or the desk facing the wall. And for those of you that do have constraints either with your space or have trouble working in your space and your desk is positioned facing a wall, you'll notice that it is much easier to go outside or go in another room to actually do that creative type work. Well, part of that is when you're sitting at the desk facing the wall, that idea flow, boom, it's coming out and hitting a wall. And so when you flip the desk, you'll see as you walk out, Greg's desk now, floating in the room so that he has more space in front than he has behind. That promotes great energy flow in terms of ideas. So thinking about those movies that always feature the president. When the person walks into the camera view of the president, he or she is always sitting behind a desk looking at you when you walk in. And think about the higher you rank in any organization. I mean, you guys are the rock stars that are really growing and building this organization. So you are the exact prime people that need to be thinking about this type of thing, because as you're looking at what are the ideas that will shape Q1, Q2, 2011, that's high idea generation work. It's not the tactical grunt work. It does require space and flow. So paying attention to something as simple as desk positioning is key. So you want to have hot items, things you use or love, in the prime real estate. Lots of space and room around it with nothing in it. Just green space for that creation to take place. A couple of steps away would be where you'd keep your warm items. Files that would be reference files, for example. Things where you're done the action, but they're still active. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And finally, in the tough, most difficult to access regions, that's where you'd want to keep the cold items, or the things where the energy is rarely used and not moving much at all. And so you can see, even if we're talking about a desk, that hot zone is within arm's reach of your power center, which is where you sit. And from there, being able to get up and take a couple of steps to go to the file cabinet that contains less used files. And even those dead files, like the archive old tax returns, if and whenever possible, if you have a huge space, great, stick them in a file cabinet further away from the hot zone. But if you don't, in a banker's box, in a storage unit, underneath, in a garage, attic, somewhere where it's not actually affecting your energy is the very best place.
Well, I know within feng shui, you know, there's, I forget the technical term, but there's things you can do if you do have that space constraint. Do this, like add a water.
A cure.
A cure,
Yes,
thank you.
absolutely.
So if you do need your desk against a wall, because both my home and my work desk, it's just the room set up, is there, what would you do to be
Well,
cure
I'm
for
not
that?
a feng shui expert by any stretch of the imagination. I really only use it for the basics of furniture placement, because that's where it intersects with the work that I do. But I happily can refer you to a couple of people who can definitely answer what the cures are if you are in that type of a
Just
position.
like, have you found things that help people think better if their desk does have to be?
Well, one of those things is when anytime you're doing creative type work, to just know that your very best strategy will be to move out of
gotcha,
the
okay.
space entirely. And
What
just
if you do like a nice mural of an open space or something that actually has depth?
yeah, and for some
Hey,
people,
help.
they've put their desk below where there's a window, so it gives the illusion as if you have the space in front of
Some
you.
type of an open field that gives you that.
So is it better to have your desk facing a window and looking outside, or looking toward the door as people are coming in?
Better to, in an optimal position, you never want to have your back to the door, optimally. So if you could position it so that the window would be here and the door would be here, that would be
That's
ideal.
all.
Best.
And if any of you that have questions about your unique specific situation, please feel free to take a digital photo, email it to me. I'll make sure you all have my information after tonight. And I'm happy to just give you a quick 10-minute by phone of, based on what I'm seeing, what will work best for your space, for sure.
And I've done this with my space, and basically my hot stuff is like, there's a drawer here, a cupboard here, everything. I don't even have to leave the chair. I just have to spin my chair to grab all my hot stuff. My warm stuff is like just like 3 steps away to another filing system, and then my cold stuff is in the closet, which is, you know, supplies, or down in the shed down below. And it does clear up. Even if I'm not doing creative work, what I've found is having that space, the green spot, and having access to all the stuff that I need, like right where I need it, it just makes it easier for me to pick up the phone and make the calls. Even though that's not a creative thing, it just, I'm in a better place. My energy's in a better place, so it's easier.
Yes.
That phone is not as heavy. But when I have a lot of stuff weighing me down, the phone is heavy.
I had a ocean view desk for a long time, and it was awesome. I saw every sunset, but I found it hard to work at. I did. I loved it, but I found that it was almost overly distracting to be looking out the window all the time, and I would sit there and I wouldn't get as much done. Now I have the window to the back of me, and I do face the door. It's more open, and I'm much more creative in that. So it definitely.
And you may even find that when you're talking on the phone or you have a headset on and you're in the midst of a conversation, to be able to swivel and without looking, in terms of looking at the detail of what you're seeing outside, but just looking at, for example, the gorgeous ocean view that Greg and Whitney have, that can also be a source of, depending on the activity, where your focal point comes in. And so having different areas and different zones dedicated to the type of activity also pays off for sure. So does that cover a pretty good sense? And so we already are doing this very well in terms of not just furniture positioning, but actual tangible items. Think of your bathroom, for example, or washroom or restroom. I never really know in America. I'm from Canada.
Bathroom.
Bathroom, thank you. I called it a washroom once at a restaurant, and the girls actually burst out laughing.
That's kind of Midwestern.
Well, there you go. Canada's practically part of the Midwest, aren't we?
Northern Midwest.
I don't think you'll ever get a Vancouverite.
I know, exactly, and I am from the West Coast. So, that said, think of the bathroom. Thank you. We have the roll of toilet paper right beside the toilet. That's the hot roll. Then you've got a couple underneath the vanity. That's the warm stash. And then you've got the giant Costco pack on a shelf in the garage or somewhere. Brilliant use of hot, warm, and cold, and positioned exactly correct. So now you just need to start looking to the other areas of your life. And you know, when I've taught this portion of content before, I've had people say to me, well, now I can see it. Even as much as I had a woman I was organizing, coaching by phone. Never met her, never seen her space, but you can actually do this type of work by phone. And she said, I'm standing in my kitchen. It's Canada, it's the middle of winter, and what should be on top of my refrigerator in the middle of the hot zone of the hearth of my home, but sunscreen in the middle of winter in Canada? And so she was able to visually see instantly where the low-hanging fruit, because access the low-hanging fruit, you don't need to go home and reinvent every single room instantly. Just walk through each room and just choose and pick out those immediate things that you can see aren't exactly in the spot. And now remember that little phrase, keep it in motion? So when she took the sunscreen off, she said, well, now where will I put this? And I said, well, where is going to be the next time that you use it? And she said, I'm going to Hawaii in February. Perfect. The ideal place then is in a large Ziploc bag inside your suitcase, because that's going to be so that every time you're thinking, I need to, take this with me to Hawaii, great, because in Canada they're not accessing that summer stuff in the winter, right? For people who travel a whole lot like Greg and Whitney, my recommendation goes even further, which is when you travel a lot, have a travel drawer, a dedicated drawer inside your armoire or chest of drawers that is that consistent place where you're keeping all of the different travel accessories and things that you use when you go, so that as you're mentally, don't want to forget that on my next trip, you have a home for it. You don't have to lie it out on a table to remind you. And again, that's something that I see so often. I see people who have books out or different things that are actual memory triggers. So they're trying to trigger a reminder to do something, whereas once you start to get into this systems-based thinking, you'll see that those triggers are less necessary than they were before.
I also use that same strategy. Like if I have a meeting and I don't want to forget something, I'll just put it by the door. It's like I'm going to see it on the way out the door. I can't forget it. So
Totally.
position.
Which is
He's
like
using positioning.
It's almost like an outbox. What you're using that area by the door. And another way that you can use the inbox and outbox theory is traditionally you've seen it in an office setting, right? Where people have an actual inbox that people will put any new items into, and then whenever they've signed the paper or whatever, they put it back in the outbox for it to then go back to either their assistant. Well, every home really needs an inbox and an outbox. Chances are that the outbox will be somewhere on, keeping it in motion on the way out the door, or a place where you normally would go as one of the last stops before you leave the place. It can be just a basket or a bin. That's where you keep your keys. For a lot of people, their sunglasses, cell phones when they're not in use, all of those things, that handbags, you name it. And that same idea can now spin off into your briefcase. And if you do travel a fair amount or live out of your briefcase, as I do, great to have two folders in there, one called inbox, one called outbox, so that as you're beginning a trip, let's imagine we're going away, everything you're going to need to use on the trip gets put into inbox. As you use it throughout the trip, now once you're finished with it, it goes into outbox, so that by the end of your journey, inbox is empty, outbox is full. You pull the contents, file them back away, and everything cycles as you're going, so that there isn't that intermingling while you're on the road. This could work when you're doing field work. It could be anything from A to Z, because I'm south of the border and I'm learning. Now, let's switch gears for just a moment. Any last questions on positioning, organizing, as we...
I just want to make a comment, because what you helped us train me to do is when I get home after a trip, I unpack everything. And that really has shifted my energy a lot, because I used to just let it sit there and I'd pull things out as time went on, but right when I get home, I unpack everything. When I came in the door today, I put my purse where it has a home. That was really powerful for me too, to teach me the fact that everything should have a home.
Yes.
So it makes it more of like, oh, I want to be at home, you know, and
Exactly.
it gives it some structure for me.
Totally.
So that has shifted a lot.
And, you know, many people's moms, like I'm sure my mom did, really taught us that rule. A place for everything and everything in its place. And it's very easy to gloss over that, again, as just one of those cliches that we hear about organizing, similar to the things you use and love. However, when you really dive into that and you think about having a home for everything, it isn't just one home, because a lot of things that truly are and become clutter in people's lives are actually things that have a life cycle. So if you think about a piece of cutlery, this is where it excels, and it's the A+ version in most people's lives. How often do you see errant cutlery in anybody's home? You don't generally, right? You can open a drawer, there it's sitting all nice in its own little divided containers, and you know that that piece of cutlery will be one of a number of places. You take it out, you use it, you put it in, for many people, the sink. Eventually it finds its way to the dishwasher, and once again it finds its way back into the drawer. So that life cycle of a piece of cutlery, now apply that to bills or papers. So when a bill comes in the door, it goes into the inbox. Then once you're ready to process, you discard and recycle probably the extra envelopes and spam and all the rest of that. Then, if it is a bill to pay, for example, you probably have a system already, whether it's a folder, whether it's putting it into your online banking and triggering it for the date that it's due. Whatever your system is, chances are you have one already. And from there, the bill naturally would go into its next resting place and then moved into archive and onwards once the taxes and everything else are done. So just thinking about that, where is the home for every single piece of paper in its life cycle, really is going to help for that idea of keeping it in motion.
So what comes up for me when you're talking about the cutlery, but it's like the in our business, it's like you make a call and you can't complete the task because you need a response from this person. So you leave a message,
Yes.
and then you wait.
Yes.
And it's like paper. You know, you've got almost complete, but not quite.
Great.
So
So
you
one
can't-
other file you want to keep in your hot zone is called a follow-up waiting for file. So just follow-up / waiting for, only one file. If you start to subcategorize, you'll find that, again, you get a number of different places you could go looking for it, and the system starts to break down. So if you have called, you jotted on the note, left voicemail on such and such a date, such and such a time, put it in follow-up waiting for. If the person calls you back, you know exactly where to pull from, But you also want to have a second piece of the system, which is a trigger in your calendar. For most clients, I recommend Fridays because they're light days for most people, and they would have a block of time in the calendar called Follow-Up Friday, which means that no matter what happens, on Fridays, you go into the follow-up waiting for file and have a glance through. Anything that naturally needs to be taken care of or ball moved down the field once again, that's when you'd be doing it inside there.
Usually it's not a piece of paper though for us, it's a phone call. And we have, I have my one place where everything to do is here.
Sure.
I've tried every electronic system. I've taken the Franklin Covey
Yeah.
system, blah, blah, blah. But, it's just the containment. But then what happens is, okay, so I'm supposed to forward it to the next day, but there might be 20 things. And then what I end up is it's the maintenance of
Right.
not being able to keep up on even the maintenance of it. And that's
So
where
with a
everything
phone
breaks
log,
down.
which is what I would call a little, I have a notebook very similar to that. I don't carry forward to the next day. But what I do is I date the top of every new entry with today's date, and then I use a little star as a bullet because I'm a nerdy girl and I probably would dot my I's with hearts if, as well. And once you've gone through and recorded who has called you, I have a very simple system. If I've called them back and gotten them, I tick it off and I actually strike through the whole entire line. And I skip. One of the things when you're using a notebook like that is to give yourself enough green space in between your entries so that visually it's very apparent and very obvious. So that once you've struck out a line, you can see if there is a line that hasn't been struck out. Another one that I'll do is if I did leave a voicemail, I'll put an MSG in a circle with, 12-2 if it was on the second, and perhaps even the time. So that again, I've got that double entry. When they do call back, then I tick it off and strike it out. But until that point, I know that if I've handled it by email, E in a circle. If it's text, TXT, circle.
Well, let's do this. Let's save some of this discussion for when we go further into the systems and we talk about the folder systems and some of the tools that we have, and we'll be able to weave that in a little bit better.
Sounds absolutely great. We've got one other question.
Just Chantel, just in regards to what you all are saying, I use the color system with that because we're all, in here we all kind of use the same folder system. So what they're trying to do is kind of clear out what they're doing. So you have somebody that you can't reach, I use color coordinated postums. And if I didn't reach that person or feel like I finished that particular call up or that follow up with that client, I put a purple tab on it. So that I'm not removing it from my file and you're not removing it from your notebook, but they're purple tabs so that you can go back without having to change your system. So
And we are going to be, as Greg mentioned, touching on the folder system that already exists within Take Shape for Life coming up. But I love that you have found an innovation inside that.
Well, we
great.
don't want to change the system that was originally made by
just
the
want to
company.
make it.
Exactly, just to
Absolutely.
make it easy.
Yeah, make it work for you.
Perfect. So now let's shift gears from the idea of organization to planning, because planning is really at the heart of every great system. And if Abraham Lincoln would spend 6 of his 8 hours available to chop down a tree sharpening his axe, I think that's probably great wisdom that we all can use as well. So do we have, no, we don't have everyone with a handout, so if you can take one of those and pass it along. The heart of every great long-term system includes some aspect of planning, and we want to make this customized to you. If you can only choose one planning rhythm, the ideal one would be quarterly planning. How many of you do any type of planning inside your business or your life? So, lots of converse. So, you'll see on that handout, one of the key things that I would really like you to do, and how many of you have a calendar here tonight? Like your actual calendar, either on a phone, smartphone, or some way, some shape or form. One of the things that I'm going to give you just a few minutes, we can do a little bio break in combination with you doing this piece of the exercise, which is to really commit to what dates you will do some planning and actually put those dates into your calendar. So you can see that on the handout it gives you available rhythms for annual planning, quarterly planning, monthly planning, weekly planning, and daily. The key thing with that is, and when it's best to actually do them is also written on the sheet. So for example, with quarterly planning, you want to be looking at any given natural calendar quarter. So right now we're in Q1 at February 22nd today. So we're coming into the home stretch. End of March is going to be the end of Q1. So you want to be doing your planning for Q2 between the 15th and last day of Q1, so that enough of the quarter has passed that you have data to actually be looking at your numbers and everything else, while still giving you enough time before the start of the quarter that you can really have, again, a little bit of green space in that couple-week period to be able to move and maneuver. Now, one of the wonderful things about Take Shape for Life is you already have a lot of tools that are inherent inside this planning rhythm to really support you and help you. And we're going to touch on those just to make sure that you really are clear and know what they are. But very first and foremost is looking at the dates and looking at what feels right and feels best to you. Because as a life planning mechanism, not everyone includes, we were talking about the integration of calendars and what a revelation that was for you when, after carrying two calendars, one for work and one for pleasure, all of a sudden it all came together in one. And it's a little bit like that in that you only have 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. So by separating them, that's where balls start to drop in the middle. And planning is very much like that when we're looking only at our business planning and not at the macro, life that we're leading. Because our energy is affected by vacations, whether we're taking them, whether we're not, whether we're having free days, buffer days, focus days, all of those rhythms that we naturally go through in our lives in terms of what we're bringing to any given day, it's affected by a lot of different factors. So sitting down and taking that time away, you'll hear often people say going on a planning retreat. Well, one of the key things, again, the heart of it is in the root of the word retreat. If you're about to jump across a canyon, what do you do first? You don't just stand at the edge and jump. You take a little bit of a retreat so that you can get a run at it and jump, right? Mm-hmm. That going back gives you that ability to go further. And so thinking about that from a planning mechanism, that little retreat, even if it just means going to L'Auberge in Del Mar and enjoying, a glass of champagne while you're sitting imagining what is to come in the coming year or the coming 3 months, that retreat does absolute wonders for mind, soul, and the sharpening of your axe. And one of the things I know you wanted to talk about tonight was the idea of balance, and how do you get that balance in your life? And I have to tell you, I may get some strange looks, but I'm not on the bandwagon for balance, frankly. I think that it's a buzzword that is as toxic and challenging as perfection or any of those other words that are unachievable things. Because when you think of the idea of balance and the olden day scales, right? The only time they're ever in balance is at the moment that they're dead even and they've stopped moving. Well, when in 2011 is our life ever going to be dead even and stopped moving? It's just not. So maybe let's use another word like harmony. And imagine that you are the conductor of your life. And all of the different roles that you play, the hats that you wear, the balls that you juggle, are instruments. And it is your job as the conductor to survey the symphony that is your life and try to get all of those things playing so that it flows into this harmonious masterpiece. And really, when you start to think of life that way, you'll see that in any great symphony, it ebbs and it flows. It charges and it's harsh, and it'll hold on for a good long while, and then it'll move into a nice, easy, lighter piece that'll give you a little breathing room from all of the charging.
So that just totally spun my brain. Not because of the word harmony, but because discounting balance. Because I've always used them together as having balance and harmony. And harmony is I understand what you're saying about living with the harmony and the rhythm of what's going on. But for me, at the same time, it was always important to me to balance areas of my life saying, okay, I have to tend to my spiritual side, I have to tend to my personal side, I have to tend to, me, and I can't just do one thing because then I'm out of
Sync.
sync.
Absolutely.
And to me, so to me the word balance worked in that aspect with harmony and rhythm, not necessarily excluding it. But
Right, and it can be, if you think of a yin and yang, for example, inside the white there's always the drop of dark, right? And so
Yeah.
you have that homeostasis that is the natural infrastructure of your life. You have a place that for you feels right, and that's going to be a moving target that will ebb and flow.
Absolutely.
Depending on what part of the music you're in. And so if you can embrace the idea of making sure that your different speakers or authors have called them, I've heard, I believe it's John Gray, who talks about your love tanks. And he talks about when one of them gets too low, you start to have challenges. So if you can imagine those different areas of your life, like the love tanks, where you want to make sure that you have enough sustenance inside those tanks to keep it manageable while you're sort of, and you can see now why organization and life is such an art. I mean, it's amazing and it's awesome to think not just about space, but then you add time and then you add information flying at us. And this thing that there's no course. I mean, we're trying to take a course now, but really, when we come out of the womb, there isn't this Organization 101 user manual that helps us define that. And so I feel like at the heart of what you're saying, I 100% am with you all the way. And if we can just make the little harmonious shift so that when the rhythm starts to get intense, we can embrace that rather than be pushing against it because things are not in even Steven.
Sure.
I think the key is you said you attend. That's the key word, is you attend to those areas of your life that need it. And that way you feel like you're not neglecting them. So that's different than balance. The idea of balance that most people have is that static thing. And this is a great exercise. Everyone stand up. This is a little energy. So stand up and put your feet about shoulders width apart and really get solid and feel grounded so that you can actually kind of bounce yourself into the ground and you can feel. Now you can actually get pretty static by standing here, right? And you kind of feel balance. But now try this. Now lift one leg. Stand on one leg. Now, is balance static?
No.
Are you constantly making like little subtle adjustments with your ankle and with your energy and everything? This is balance. Now we're balancing. Balancing is this. It's the ability to move through the dynamic world we live in whilst feeling like you're still grounded. You're still grounded, but you're having to put effort and energy into keeping that balance. I think that's a good example of static balance versus dynamic balance.
And absolutely it is, yeah. Balance being everything equal might not be what we're looking for, but balance in, okay, when life takes you this way, you have to still balance those energies as you go, trying to live in harmonious as the river of life kind of weaves through the landscape.
Absolutely.
Just to add on that, balance is that experience as I go from one extreme to the other. And I think that's part of it too. It's like, when you're at one extreme, you want to come into some sort of balance as you move back and forth. Otherwise, you're not going to move forward.
Really take another commitment to is having the stuff more in flow and organized and all that, so that like if we have a sick child, there's room to handle it, and that's a big deal. Surprise!
Yes,
more
and
accidents.
absolutely,
There's
and
no room for it
exactly.
in most people.
And so that's applying that same idea of the green space that you saw in the diagram around the hot moving items of our life. We want to have that buffer of white space or green space so that we do have the flexibility to move in and out and be agile and able to go where new information takes us.
Well, green space are on your time.
And thinking about those three things, the three dimensions of organizing, space, time, and information, you want to ensure that that same formula, for lack of a better word, is happening, where you've got the hot in the hot zone, lots of green space.
So let's check in with this. How many of you, show of hands, did the annual review that we recommended, the one that Whitney and I do, our retreat, we sent out the forms and everything. How many of you actually did the year in review and you look back at last year and you planned ahead for this year? Okay, about 30%. Okay, good. Awesome. Well, whether you did it our way or your own way, but you have an annual review.
You do something.
You do it. Okay, so let's actually go through and we're going to put the dates in, right? And then put them from here into our calendar.
Would be wonderful.
Okay.
So again, looking at that annual planning, how long should you do it? Well, let your gut be your guide, but at a very minimum, I would recommend 1 full day. Absolutely full to the nines. You will find as you develop this skill, if you can really be diligent in giving it a chance to show itself in your life and show you the results and really commit to a planning rhythm for 1 year, I promise you, I haven't had a single client who has not said it is the single best move that they've ever made to take their business and their life to the next level. Because again, if you want to leap over the canyon, you do need to retreat back first. And by again, having a planning session in the calendar where you can survey it at a high level, look at the dates that you already have fixed, events that are happening, things you want to go to, conference, all of those big sort of rocks, and then start looking at, oh, okay, what's the harmonious flow or that ecosystem that you will need in terms of personal rejuvenation and professional rejuvenation. I did see, do you have a question?
Just double checking. So annual planning is both like what you want for the year, what your goals are for the year, and then also locking in for the whole year things that you know will happen. So it's like a goal setting session plus a logistical.
And you're looking at that larger view of the year. And at that point, I often do recommend that people choose a theme for the year. So for example, my theme for 2011 is creating for pleasure. And I read this brilliant book. It's really tough to find, but it's by a woman named Mira Kirschenbaum, and it's called The Gift of a Year. And she talks about 4 different types of years that people may find themselves in, and you'll naturally kind of know which one of the 4 years you're heading into. The first one is R&R. You're exhausted, you're totally spent, and just energetically you need nothing more than to rest and relax. So that's one type of a year. The second one would be getting it all together. You've got a bunch of loose ends, things are kind of a little bit crazy, and you really want to bring things together, get organized, finish a project, tie up the loose ends. The third type of year is putting more of yourself in your life, which is you're not exhausted, you've got vitality, you've got it together. Again, it's not an event, it's a process. And now you're really ready to answer the bigger questions of who am I? What makes me feel great? What is the fire that burns and inspires me? And the fourth type of year is the great
What's
adventure.
that called?
The book is called
No, the third one.
Putting More of You in Your Life. So it's really getting clear on who you are and what the vibe of what you're trying to accomplish in that year coming up. And the last one is the Great Big Adventure, which is for some people that trip to Africa to volunteer that they've always wanted to do, or something that is a very large event-based adventure that really will catapult their life into who knows what direction. So using those 4 categories at your annual planning to really be thinking about where am I in terms of my life cycle? Am I in any one of those 4 areas? And once you've figured that out, what is the theme? What's the heartbeat? If you had to choose almost a theme song for the year, would it be an up-tempo, Black Eyed Peas song, or would it be classical? Would it be jazz? What's the mood or the tone that you'd like to set for the upcoming year?
So my answer to your question is there's a handful of small things that we do as a mandatory. We do our goals, we do our theme, we do our vacations, we do our major events, and we do our Q1 structural tension chart. So we know at least the first quarter is locked in. Is that helpful?
And I would
Do you
recommend
do
adding a
goals,
budget.
themes, vacations, and events only for the first quarter, what happens in January?
No. I do the year goals,
You do the whole year.
the 1 year goals,
Okay.
the 1 year theme,
Okay.
the vacations,
For the whole year.
the major events that I know of at that
Right.
point.
Right.
Then I'm done with the year, and then I break it back into Q1
the
structural
Q1.
tension action plan.
Okay, got it.
So I guess I feel ignorant in the corner. How could somebody possibly be successful if they have not been doing this stuff all along? Is it possible for somebody to have floundered along into success without having done this?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Most of the world. Most of the
Oh,
world
okay.
never does this.
However, they don't have balance and harmony. Success and balance and harmony are not synonymous to each
But
other.
I agree with what she said about balance. I totally agree with that because that's way overrated.
Well, and this is
Well, we
why
decided that it wasn't. It's tension balance is good. It's static balance is bad.
I love what she said.
But to your point of being in the corner, wondering if
I'm
you know,
like so
how
shocked
other
over here.
people get along.
Yeah.
That's why. Congratulations. That's why you're in this room. Because it's time. You are at a place, a level, a threshold where you are growing to such a place where the standards that have gotten you here to this moment now are moving into a whole new level to help you manage the success that has found you so far and the success that you're moving into with your business and your life. Because the more successful you
But I
become,
wouldn't have been able to do what I did with my 4 children if I weren't doing this. My kids wouldn't be where they are today if I did not implement the stuff that you said, and I'm sort of surprised. I wonder, don't you think Donald Trump has had someone just like you? I can't imagine people that are really successful, they all have to have you, or they have to have that innately in them. Do you think? I'm so perplexed.
some people have the innate piece of planning and organization,
Okay.
and it's actually not innate in terms of they have a lucky gene.
Okay.
The skill that is inherent in someone who is organized is pattern recognition. So it's an actual developable skill,
Okay.
right? So that means that someone who is organized can see a lump of unrelated items, be able to spot the pattern, create categories, and have it make sense. And so when you're applying planning, really all they're doing, and to many people it is so intuitive. I train professional organizers as part of what I do for a living. And most organizers, when you sit them down and say, how do you do what you do? Say, I have no idea, it's completely intuitive. Which is not the right answer when you're trying to franchise a business or trying to replicate what it is that you do, right? It needs to be concrete and duplicatable.
That's the bottom line is for our
Yeah.
business to be
Yes.
sustainable,
Yes.
for you to have sustainable success that's not just short-lived, for you to have something that is transferable to another, is you have to develop the skills of planning and you have to learn those skills so that you can teach them how to do it so they can have sustainable success.
That's cool. Yeah, and I think the people that are really successful in this business all have that.
You bet.
They have to.
You bet.
Very cool. Thank you.
We are getting
I was
behind
going to
schedule.
ask you if the timer had actually had play press to it. Or
Oh, I
not.
didn't press it. I
Okay.
didn't know
So
that
if
was
you
my
can
job.
give me, what are we at now?
We're at 53 minutes.
Okay,
You want to
great.
put it in for 53 minutes?
Krista, can you just tell
No.
us the author's last
Put
name?
it for
real
20
quick?
minutes.
Mira, M-I-R-A, Kirschenbaum, Kirschenbaum.
Thank you.
Very tough to find, even on Amazon. Best to look for a used copy where you can.
When Greg listed out what he and Whitney do, you said you wanted to add something.
Yes, the one thing I wanted to add was budget. If you're not running a budget, really good habit to get into, to start small, don't try and eat the whole elephant. Just even look at all of the major events that you have when you're doing annual planning and start to figure out what the cash flow is going to start to look like. When is conference, and what does that mean in terms of when your flight needs to be booked, when your accommodation expense, and all the rest of it, so that you can start to integrate some of these practices that, again, as your team grows, you'll want to have as part of your replicatable business toolkit. Okay? Any last things? All right.
So let's finish this. So monthly, so we do the
My
monthly.
apologies, yes.
So what we do in our business, obviously, is the year goal, the 90-day goals. We do those structural tension charts for every 90 days for Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And then we do monthly goals. And then we do weekly check-ins, which we'll go through and that. And then you have your daily actions and your daily projects. So do you want to sign this as a homework assignment or?
I would really, if all of you feel comfortable committing to just putting those dates in the calendar, and one of the other files that you want to have in place, you can keep it in your hot zone if you're an idea machine, and if you're not, it can be in with your warm files, is to have a folder called future ideas, where again, as part of the planning process, not only reviewing the things that Greg mentioned, but also that's the one file you want to pull and look through to really ask yourself, am I ready to action any of these items and move them into current projects for the coming quarter, or just keep them back in the future ideas folder to revisit 3 months from now to see if by then you'll be ready to begin to implement. And as part of that planning rhythm, you already, as mentioned, have a bunch of tools inside your Take Shape for Life toolbox that connect with and bring this planning process all together. So when you're looking at your goals worksheet, does everyone know where to find and what the goals worksheet is?
So when new health coaches get started on weightlossdoctor.net, you log in, and there's a section called New Health Coaches Getting Started. And they click on that, and it has a list of tools that they can download, and at the bottom it has the goal setting worksheet. Any of you that are coaching with me or Whitney, it's mandatory for you to go through that worksheet and set your goals for the year. And it's a similar process that we would do at the end of the year, but it's abbreviated to be able to, so somebody can get through it. And that's the goal setting worksheet she's talking about.
Right, and then at the 90-day or quarterly planning level, that's often the time frame you're using for structural tension charts, correct? So making sure that all of those things you have decided are current projects for this current quarter, you want to make sure that you are utilizing the structural tension chart form to assist you in managing and breaking that down bite by bite into smaller steps.
Which is actually the last page of the worksheet. So, but we use those so often that I have a folder in my hot space with structural tension. So if I'm doing a coaching with Denise, sometimes I'll just pull out a clean sheet of paper, or I'll pull out the structural tension chart and I'll write it down. I'll write down her what, her why, her current reality, and start mapping out the structural tension chart. And I'll fax it to them, or I'll give it to them afterwards.
And just FYI, the folder heading on the hanging tab for that one is quick reference. So all of your forms and templates, the blank copies, all belong in quick reference.
Chris, I have a question.
Sure.
Are these just six separate folders that have this, or this is just the system, not necessarily 6 folders?
This is inside the Take Shape for Life, essentially from the downloads area where you can access these tools. In terms of where you file them,
Yeah.
the goals worksheet, the blank ones, would be part of the forms and template that would be in quick reference. Same goes for blank copies of the weekly update form and structural tension, because those are all just basic forms and templates, correct?
So you're saying like do an actual folder for quick reference in your computer or
That
whatever?
would be, sure, yeah.
So you just know where that is, okay.
Exactly, and your paper and your electronic folders, ideally you want to have them exactly mirrored, so that you're using consistent language across the board, even when you start to get into email as well, when you're looking at your folder constructs underneath. Client folder system, that's going to be red hot, right in the hot zone, so that it's within arm's reach of your power center chair. Now, the next one is your...
That for me is on my desk on a stand-up file, so I don't even have to open a folder. I can just grab the file, folder 1, file folder 2. It's standing up on the desk.
And so the next one that you'll see, the HC folders, we really, really like these clear plastic folders. They are one of the tools that people really tell me are a life changer and a game changer just in a little folder itself. You can buy them a pack of 10 at the Container Store for $2.99. Or if you don't want to drive all that way, then let me know and I'll make sure to get some to you pronto. So that would just be having 3 individual folders, also kept in your hot zone. One labeled new/HCs, one labeled business coaches, and one labeled business leaders. So that just in the same way that you have the client folder system set up, you now have one going for HCs as well.
Now let me share with you where this came from. So the presidential director, Dr. A, put together a team of presidentials to take all the best practices of what's working and what we like about the old folder system and what we don't like about it. So just so you know, if you haven't heard, the client folder system is going to be totally revamped in the next, by conference for sure, maybe sooner. a part of that revamping is the first 3 sections are going to be for clients, just kind of similar to what we do now. New client getting started, client on B-Slim, client on maintenance. Folder number 4 is going to be health coach candidate. They're not a coach yet, but they're a potential candidate, and there's a different set of process that you need to run that person through, right? Introduce the business, answer their questions, walk them through the process. Once they become a coach, folder number 5 is going to be a new health coach folder. What do you do in their first 30, 60 days to get them up and started, get them up to their CAD bonus? The next folder, folder number 6, is going to be once they start sponsoring other coaches, now they have to learn how to be a business coach. So you've already taught them how to be a health coach here, now you're teaching them how to be a business coach. So what we did is we've been using this type of an approach with our teams. So I actually have my business leaders listed right here, which is also reflected on my whiteboard. And I have my leaders, the ones who are, and by the way, this business leader is somebody who has gone from a business coach where they're sponsoring people. So this shift from here to here, a new health coach is they've been a month or 2 in the business, they're still just bringing on clients and supporting clients. When they start sponsoring people and bringing on coaches, I put them in this folder. Okay? Once they reach the micro franchise and they've learned how to help somebody else get to ED, now they're a business leader. Now we're working on teaching them leadership skills. So that's the business leaders folder, business coaches folder, much thicker, and then the new coach folder, fairly thick as well.
So do you just have like a sheet on a specific coach, you know, information about them? Is that what you have? I mean, I guess I can ask that offline, but...
No, that's a great question. I have, so let me just pull out a couple here. Here's Denise Raspberry. So I have maybe 5 or 6 of her weekly update forms that she's done over, faxed in and we've gone over together.
Okay.
I have her annual goals, her 1-year goals, and I have her 90-day structural tension chart.
Got it.
And as I finish and I put a new one, I just staple it to the back and I put it back into the folder system.
Got it. Okay.
So it's basically I'm managing these documents right here.
Right.
And Greg, I just want to add something.
Right.
I've been sliding their teams into there as well.
Right. And if I have one of her coaches that's going to get in the process, I'll put them right behind her.
Yeah, so it's organized so you can
Yeah, so I keep teams together. That helpful?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're giving you kind of a pre-opportunity to play with this concept here, using just creating your own folders before the company releases it. So I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to, it's working for us. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It works for us very, very well.
Yeah, it streamlines things.
Put their information in there too.
And one of the cool things about the fact that it's clear plastic, 85% of the population is visual, which means you think in pictures, colors, and locations. So now that you can actually see into it without having to go the extra step of opening it, that's